when he raised up his gun and the gun barrel became just a circle, I knew this was my last moment and that he had forgotten mercy. He had lost his way. And so he couldn't see me as a human being. And I was so close to him that I could actually see his finger on the trigger. And I watched him pull the trigger. And I heard the sound of the gun go off. And I felt the bullet sear across the top of my head. So all these beings, one after the other, showed me that no matter what was going to happen, I was going to still remain connected to divine source. And so that's what I want everyone to know, that when it is your time to cross, when it is your time to go home, you will be guided by those who are meaningful to you. He was teaching me our worst moments, our greatest tragedy, when everything we thought was stable is pieces lying on the ground, when we thought what would never change is no longer even available to us. Those are the moments of breakdown that can become the moment of being broken open. And so if you haven't yet arrived to making meaning of your tragedies, of your destruction moments, keep going. Have faith. I believe we trauma survivors can be some of the most potent agents of change in the world because we know what is needed, that we can give to others what we weren't given.
This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everybody. Welcome, and welcome to my guest, Robin Landsong. Hello, Robin.
Hi, Heather.
It is so wonderful to have you here. You have one of the most profound near-death experiences that I have heard, and your entire story is deeply moving. And for anybody listening, I hope you'll stick around for this because it really is a special one. And I have heard your story several times and I have loved it. And even having heard it several times, I went out and yesterday I got your audiobook and it is beautiful. I mean, it's the story's so well written. The way you talk and tell your story is beautiful. But we'll talk more about that at the end. I just want to tell you how much I've enjoyed that. But right now, I just want to get to your story because I know this is going to touch a lot of people. So take us to the events leading up to your near-death experience, and then take us right on into your near-death experience.
I'm glad to. And first I want to start out by saying why it's important to me and why I do like sharing my story. And I hear so often from people, if you can make it through that, then I can make it through my divorce, my illness. And so it's really about inspiration around our resilience. And so that's the key motivation, as well as honoring the people who saved my life during war. So begins in 1977. I was 8 years old. I'm American, and I was living in the U.S. on the East Coast. And post-Vietnam War, very stressful time period in America. And this is well before Child Protective Services was developed. So no systems to really track abducted children. And so I was watched by this man that I walked home from school by myself. He picked me as an unprotected child. Unfortunately, my parents really lacked the innate ability and drive to protect me and my siblings, as that generational disturbance can sometimes leave parents without that natural instinct of all mammals to protect their children. So he spotted me, came and got me at the end of the school day. And really instantly, I knew my life was in danger. The magnitude of his physical strength, and I was already a highly intuitive child, and I could perceive the severity of his mental disturbance was really quite terrifying. So I employed all my strategies as already being an abuse survivor, all my intuition to figure out, what do I need to become to survive this abduction? So he drugged me, took me out of the country. People often ask, how could he get you out of the country? Again, 1977. This is before child abduction, child trafficking was really a conversation. So I say quite easily. If you do any research of that time period, and even now, they're greatly struggling with all our technology, with human trafficking and child trafficking. So fast forwarding a bit, again, my life was in danger. He assaulted me, broke my ribs, gave me to another man. That man left me in the bush. I didn't yet realize entirely where I was, but once we were in a market and I looked around, and it was, the market was in a foreign language. It was very dark-skinned Black people. And hearing the language, I finally put it together. Oh my God, I'm in Africa. And I had thought maybe I was in some foreign part of the US, but now realizing he had taken me to the Rhodesian War, which was at its height in 1977. I, of course, didn't know at 8 years old that it was the height of the Rhodesian War. So when this man left me out in the bush, my chances of survival were next to nothing. And being a white child alone. And what happened is that a truck pulled up. It was full of Black soldiers. And I thought, this is going to be my last moment. This is going to be the end of me. They picked me up and put me in the truck, took me to a place that I now understand was one of the most dangerous places I could be during the war. Two men argued over me one wanted to shoot me, one wanted to save me. And again, here is why I share my story, is because the man who took the risk to save my life was a soldier. And so in a way, if we look at it from a political point of view, I have the enemy to thank for my life. And he literally pulled me in, and as a protective human being, because I was a child and he was just doing the right thing, even though I wasn't of his race, of his nationality. And so he took me and delivered me to a village, and they took me in. And one of the women in particular mothered me. And again, had been raised in a family that wasn't loving, my mother didn't have the capacity to be a caring, motherly person. So when this woman in this village took me in, it was my first experience of belonging and mothering. And she literally, after the other children put black ash on my face, welcoming me in with a story, this woman was calling me in with a song. And so I'm going to go ahead and sing that to you, because so many people are in need of feminine nurturing. So my song is different than her singing, but she opened up singing inside me. So I'm going to deliver that. And may it land in places where people need self-connection, connection to feminine, divine source. I am no way I am here. I am no way here. Here. Am nayo. May we all be served in connection to the land, to our body, to divine source, so that we can be filled up. We can be nurtured in our creativity, in our physical health, and in our sense of wholeness, so that we have that available. Our cup is filled so we can deliver that to others in need. So that's what she taught me when she sang to me, when she welcomed me in. And again, I'm not of her race. I'm not of her nationality. And so, especially at this time period in our country, what are the ways we can say, I see you, you're real, you matter? And that again, what I learned from her giving to me is that equality is created by giving experiences of belonging. And so where can we be generous to ourselves so that we have the capacity to be generous to others? So she and another woman really, again, mothered me, taught me what connection is, taught me what belonging is. And they took me to a river. And again, where I was assaulted on my rib cage is still a giant purple bruise. And they took me to this river, and this river bottom was full of clay. And so they undressed me, they covered my purple bruise with this clay, and they sang to me to get the hatred off my body that came with the assault when the abductor kicked me. So again, I'm going to sing in a fiery way so that if people have a history of assault, of oppression, may this song clear your body, clear your system of the confusion that came with the assault, oppression, sexual abuse, or the being diminished in whatever way. So again, this singing medicine that I deliver, may it clear your body, clear your beliefs, to remember the wholeness of who you really are and how Creator helped you be born into this world. Shoeyam, shoeya hey, shoeyam niyam na ye yo, shoey high, shoey ho. Yeah, yam neo, na ya ye. So they called me to sing with them. And when I could sing, they considered that I was going to be well. They gave me a nod of approval that I was doing well, because singing together is healing together. So for those of you who might know my story, days later after this singing healing, I wandered to the creek, back to that same creek. That was, of course, a very healing place for me. I didn't know a battle was starting, and a soldier was scouting the perimeter of that battleground. When he saw me, he raised up his gun. Sometimes I feel my story more when I'm telling it. There's almost a relief in that I've got my book and my audiobook done. And so when he raised up his gun and the gun barrel became just a circle, I knew this was my last moment, and that he had forgotten mercy. He had lost his way. And so he couldn't see me as a human being. And I was so close to him that I could actually see his finger on the trigger. And I watched him pull the trigger. And I heard the sound of the gun go off. And I felt the bullet sear across the top of my head. So it didn't go in my skull, it went across the top of my head. And it blew me off my feet because the power of it coming just literally leveled me right to the ground. And so I threw up a couple times, which is part of shock. And I rose up above my body and I was watching down from this position above. And I was watching the life go out of my heart. And I was praying for some way that my life force would be restored to my body, but it didn't happen. And so in one moment, I rushed into my heart that was like a collapsing room, and I wanted out. And in the next moment, I was rushed out the back of my heart. And I was held in this very fast transportation. And I arrived in a place that was very still and very quiet. And again, I'm going to sing some of that quietness, some of that stillness, some of that peace. And my face was touched by two feminine beings, and they showed me that I could go home to source. And this is some of my art behind me. and this is something like the divine source, the going home to where I was created. And this butterfly is showing the transformation. And that I could go home to source, be welcomed into where I was a seed syllable sung into being. But I wanted to still stay connected to my human African family and this dilemma inside myself. And so many of us have a dilemma in our childhood of, do I try to belong to my family or do I stay true to myself? Which way do I want to go? And that belonging is such a primal need for our survival, for our being, that we often choose that route and that we compromise ourselves to fit in. So again, I chose to try to stay connected to my human African family, and that sent me on a different kind of journey rather than the one I would have gone on if I had just directly connected to my source. And so in that journey, I was shown a moment of the future, and that it was going to be very difficult, and that my African family was going to be down on the ground and not able to respond to my calling out to them, that something tragic was going to happen next. But I was still guided. I was still connected in this death experience, in this death journey. And I was guided again to purify my fear, purify my contraction. And so all these beings, one after the other, showed me that no matter what was going to happen, I was going to still remain connected to divine source. And so that's what I want everyone to know, that when it is your time to cross, when it is your time to go home, you will be guided by those who are meaningful to you. And it may not be who you think or in the form that you think, but you will be connected and guided as you need in your unification, in your learning and unpacking your lifetime. So I ended up getting so close to crossing and reuniting with the source that created me. But what stopped me, what put me into pause, was that my mama had found my lifeless body, had stopped the blood flow, and she began changing her wailing into singing. And she called on the ancestors in the land to sing a calling song so potent that I heard her through the veils. And when I heard this calling song, I paused. I had a choice. I could go home to the Great Heart, or they were reminding me of my purpose to sing to others, to call them home to their wholeness, just as they were doing for me. ya ye yo, shim ne, I am no, hey I. And their calling song helped me decide to come back to this life, to sing to others, to heal their organs, to heal their brain, to heal their trauma history. So I came back to my body. The people of my village welcomed me back. And they put herbal leaves on my head to stop the blood flow, the remainder of it. I had dried blood all over my face. My mama had dried blood all over her dress. But because of their caring, because of their intact connection with one another, I was belonging in the web of life that they had cultivated. So 2 days later, the soldiers came back, attacked the village, and the image I had seen during my first death experience came true. The soldiers massacred the village. And when my second mother was trying to help us escape, she was shot from behind and went down. And when she went down, I went down with her because she was holding me on her hip. And she yelled at me to keep going. And that's been the hardest thing for me to heal. And again, I want to sing to other people who have survivor guilt, that maybe you made it when others didn't. Maybe you escaped when others experienced violence, whether it was your siblings, whether it was your comrades in battle. And so let this singing heal your survivor guilt. Shoyaham, Sheayahi, Shoyayoyam, no way. Shoyam ha, Shamneahi, Oeaheo, Ayayam. So I ran until I collapsed and I fell face forward and I had a second death experience. And in that second death experience, I met a being that I understand to be Shiva. And so Shiva is a Hindu god. And again, I was a white child from the East Coast, exposed to nothing Hindu. So again, I want to reassure people that you will meet the beings that are useful and relevant to your learning in your crossing. And so the really key thing that he got across to me is out of destruction comes new creation. So Shiva is the god of creation in one side and destruction. And that just like the forest needs decomposition to be able to make soil for something new to grow, he was teaching me our worst moments, our greatest tragedy, when everything we thought was stable is pieces lying on the ground, when we thought what would never change is no longer even available to us. Those are the moments of breakdown that can become the moment of being broken open. And so if you haven't yet arrived to making meaning of your tragedies, of your destruction moments, keep going. Have faith. Take a deep breath. Nourish yourself well with whole foods, with people who know what compassion means. Get the resources that you need to turn your tragedy into your greatest strength. And it took me 2 decades to really turn the post-traumatic stress into my strengths, which are intuition, which are total faith that people can transform. And that everything I did to heal the post-traumatic stress has now become a resource available to help me in helping and serving others in their journey. So he returned me back to my body with his strength. And I didn't want to go on, but I was a drop in the ocean of his strength, which is unending, because he could see the big picture, the huge glacial view rather than our human view, which is so brief. And he held me in the context of human history, of the history of the land. And he returned me to my body, and he gave me the strength to crawl to a well. And the next day, a woman named Mia Lucy found me. And when she went back to her homestead with me on her back, I was half dead. Again, the bleeding on my face, she had washed the dried blood off. And when a neighbor saw she had a wounded white child, they said, "Don't bother with her. It's too dangerous for you." And I am alive to thank her, because she said, "She's a living human being. I won't throw her away." So if I can make a contribution to race, to gender equality in the world, because she taught me to love beyond difference, to love through difference, and that her courage to love bravely is why I named my book Loving Bravely. And I have been able to return back, and I have found her granddaughter is the living connection to my history. She was 14 when I was 8. And I was able to retrace and find every location. I was able to bow down to her grave and sing to her. I was able to find the place where my village had been and where my death experiences happened. So that was in 2017, and also in 2019, I returned back. And people were so generous in providing information. And I gained their permission to tell my story, because it's also telling their story. And so it was incredibly important to my ethics that they gave me their consent, the remaining living people. And so again, I just want to share my hope with every other person who's lived through a tragedy, who's lost the people that they love, is that we can rebuild our interior world, and that strength can emanate to being goodness, being compassionate action in the world, because I believe we trauma survivors can be some of the most potent agents of change in the world, because we know what is needed, that we can give to others what we weren't given. Or, and again, in my case, these critical moments when I was giving love, when I was given belonging, when I was given connection, because I believe with all my trauma resolution, all my training in trauma resolution, that connection to ourselves, connection to each other, connection to the land is why we are here in this lifetime.
You have shared so many important messages with us, and I would like to dig in a little bit deeper to parts of your story, because I know there's so much more, and also ask you some questions. But let's go ahead and take that into part 2.
Wonderful. Thank you.
For those of you that stuck around, I am so glad you did. Robin's story is so powerful. As I said at the beginning, it really is one of the most profound near-death experiences that I have ever heard, and I am so grateful to be able to share it with you. There is a lot more coming up on part 2, including a deeper look into her near-death experience.
And so the second being I met, I call my royal shepherd. And so his presence was pure peace. His greatest quality was generosity. And he touched his forehead to mine in my death experience. And I could see as he sees, which is that we are all interconnected in this grand living matrix of life. And that when we shine, when we show up, when we are courageous enough to not play small, but play our true divine source creation in our body, then we light up the matrix. And we might be serving people we've never even met.
You talked about this great shepherd, and I have a feeling a lot of people are wondering if that is Jesus. Who do you feel that shepherd was? Robin has some really important messages that she shares in part 2, so I do hope you'll come back for that. In the meantime, what did you think about the things she already shared? Put your thoughts in the comment section, and as always, if you prefer just to say, I made it, that's great as well. It's funny because a lot of people that don't watch to the end, they're always like, why are people saying I made it? I don't understand. So you know the secret. So share your thoughts. If you'd like to give it a like, I'd so appreciate that. And thank you also for those of you that share these episodes with your friends. That's always wonderful. We always have links to part 1 or part 2 in the description, as well as links to all of my playlists. So anything you want to share, you should find there. And just thank you too for all of you that have subscribed. I really appreciate you being here today. I think Robin's story is really an important one, and there is still so much more coming up. So I really hope you'll join us for part 2. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.